From a young age, you were taught to fear one thing: failure. You were told it is the enemy, that it ruins lives, that it defines people, so you learned to run from it. You pushed harder, you chased improvement. You told yourself, once I succeed, everything will settle. But the truth is, it didn't. And this is where confusion begins. Why failure is easy to blame? Because failure is visible. It has shape, it has moments, it has dates and memories. You can point to it and say, that's where things went wrong. Desire is not like that. Desire hides. It moves quietly. It disguises itself as ambition. It pretends to be hope. So people blame failure, while desire continues untouched. What failure actually does. Failure hurts, but it also stops you. It forces pause. It breaks momentum. It ends a chase, at least for a moment. In that pause, something interesting happens. The noise reduces. The pressure drops. The mind becomes still. This is why some people feel strangely calm after failing. Not relieved, but quieter. Why success doesn't fix the problem. Success does the opposite. It does not stop desire. It feeds it. Once you succeed, the mind does not rest. It asks, what's next? How far can this go? Why stop now? Failure ends a path. Success opens 10 more. The misunderstanding that traps people.
People believe this story. If I stop failing, I will finally be at peace. But peace does not come from winning. It comes from wanting less. This is why some successful people feel more restless than failures. They didn't escape the enemy, they strengthened it. Why desire is harder to notice. Desire does not feel negative. It feels productive. It feels like movement, like growth, like purpose. So no one questions it. People question laziness. They question fear. They question weakness. But desire? Desire is praised. The first honest observation. Look closely at your own life. The moments you suffered most were not when you failed. They were when you wanted more than you could reach, compared yourself endlessly, tied your worth to outcomes, postponed peace for later. Failure ended attempts. Desire extended suffering. Why this truth feels uncomfortable. If failure were the enemy, the solution would be simple. Try harder, improve more, never give up. But if desire is the enemy, the solution is quieter. It requires restraint, understanding, and letting go. That frightens people more than failure ever did. What this changes, once you see this, failure loses its power over you. It becomes an event, not an identity. But desire becomes something you must observe carefully, because it does not shout, it whispers, just a little more. Where we go next? Now we must face the deeper illusion. Why success does not bring rest, why achievement increases hunger, and why the mind moves the finish line the moment you arrive. That is next.
Most people imagine success as a finish line, a point where effort stops, where pressure dissolves, where the mind finally rests. That point does not exist. What happens the moment you succeed? The moment you reach something you wanted, the mind reacts in a predictable way. It does not say, enough. It asks, what else? The feeling of arrival fades quickly, sometimes within hours, sometimes within days. Then desire reappears, stronger than before. Why satisfaction is fragile? Because it depends on contrast. You feel it only because you didn't have something before. Once it becomes normal, it loses its power. The new state becomes the baseline, and desire looks ahead again. How the goalpost moves. Before success, you think, if I reach this, I'll be okay. After success, the thought changes. Now I must maintain this. Now I must exceed this. Now I must protect this. Success increases tension, while failure often brings release. Why people feel emptier after winning. Winning removes excuses. When you fail, you can say, I'll be happy when I make it. When you succeed and still feel restless, there is nowhere to hide. You are forced to face a harder truth. The problem was never the result. Why desire uses success as fuel. Desire does not want comfort. It wants movement. Success proves movement is possible. So desire demands more. This is why the most driven people are often the most unsatisfied. They mistake motion for meaning. The trap of just one more.
Desire never asks for everything. It asks for just one more step, one more goal, one more upgrade, one more achievement. This keeps you busy enough to never stop and ask, why am I still chasing?
Why rest feels unacceptable after success. Rest feels dangerous after success. You fear losing momentum. You fear falling behind. You fear being surpassed. So you keep moving, not because you want to, but because stopping feels like threat. Desire turns rest into guilt, the quiet exhaustion. Over time, this creates a specific kind of tiredness, not physical, not emotional, mental. A constant sense of pressure with no clear source. You're doing well, yet never calm. What people get wrong about ambition. Ambition itself is not the enemy. Blind ambition is. Ambition without understanding desire becomes self-punishment disguised as progress. You keep climbing without asking why the view never satisfies. The real question. The question is not, how do I succeed more? The real question is, why does success fail to satisfy me? Until that is answered, every victory will feel incomplete. Where we go next? Now we must look at desire itself, how it survives, how it changes shape, and why it always stays one step ahead of you. That is where the real enemy is revealed. Desire is clever. It never stays still long enough to be seen clearly. The moment you understand one version of it, it changes shape. Why desire is never direct. Desire rarely says, I want more. It says, I just want to improve. I don't want to fall behind. I want to reach my potential. These sound reasonable. They sound responsible. That is why desire survives. How desire moves the finish line. Before you reach a goal, desire points forward. After you reach it, desire shifts sideways. It says, others have more. This could be better. This isn't enough yet. So, the finish line moves, not far, just enough to keep you running. Why desire feels urgent. Desire creates time pressure. It whispers, now or never, you'll regret stopping. You can't slow down yet. Urgency keeps you from thinking. Thinking would slow the chase, and desire cannot survive stillness. How comparison feeds desire. Desire rarely compares you to who you were. It compares you to who others are. This comparison is endless. There will always be someone faster, someone richer, someone more admired. So, desire always finds proof that you are behind.
Why desire attacks identity? Desire does not just want results. It wants to define who you are. You stop saying, I want to do this. You start saying, I must be this. Once desire attaches to identity, letting go feels like self-destruction. You fear stopping because you fear becoming nothing. Why desire survives success and failure? Failure feeds desire by promising redemption. Success feeds desire by promising expansion. Either way, desire stays alive. That is why changing circumstances rarely changes inner tension. The loop people don't see. Desire creates a loop. Want, chase, reach, adapt, want again. Most people never leave this cycle, not because they are weak, but because the loop feels normal. Society praises it. Why desire hates completion? Completion is dangerous to desire. Completion ends movement, so desire avoids it. It reframes endings as beginnings. You're not done. You're just starting. This keeps the wheel turning. The first crack in the loop. The loop breaks only when you ask, what happens if I stop chasing? This question scares desire because it has no answer. Where we go next? Now we must look at suffering, not dramatic suffering, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from never arriving, the kind that desire creates slowly. That is next.
Desire does not always hurt loudly. Most of the time, it hurts in silence. Why this suffering is hard to name. This suffering has no clear cause. You are not failing. You are not in danger. You may even be doing well. Yet something feels wrong, a constant tension, a sense of incompleteness, a feeling that rest must be earned. This is desire at work. Why desire never lets you arrive. Arrival would end wanting, so desire makes arrival impossible.
The moment you slow down, the mind produces a new reason to move, a new goal, a new standard, a new fear. This keeps you slightly dissatisfied at all times. Not enough to stop functioning, just enough to keep chasing. How desire turns life into a task. Life stops being lived. It becomes managed. You measure progress. You track outcomes. You evaluate yourself constantly. Even rest becomes productive. Am I resting the right way? Am I wasting time? Desire follows you everywhere. Why peace feels unproductive? Peace feels useless to desire. It creates no movement, no comparison, no growth. So desire labels peace as laziness, stagnation, weakness. This is why slowing down feels wrong even when you are exhausted. The weight of always becoming. Desire traps you in becoming. You are never allowed to be. There is always a future version of you that matters more than the present one. So the present is treated like a tool, something to endure so that later can be better. But later never arrives.
Why people feel guilty for being content. Contentment feels like betrayal. You think, if I'm satisfied now, I'll lose momentum. So you disturb your own peace. You search for problems. You create pressure. Desire cannot survive without discomfort. The cost no one talks about. This constant wanting creates a slow damage. You stop noticing small things. You stop enjoying simple moments. You stop feeling grounded. Life becomes narrow, focused only on what is missing. Why this isn't fixed by achievement. More success does not heal this. It strengthens it. Each achievement proves wanting works. So desire tightens its grip. The first honest question. The turning point comes when you ask, what am I really afraid of if I stop wanting? Often, the answer is not failure, it is emptiness. And that fear keeps desire alive. Where we go next? Now we must confront discipline. Why discipline alone fails. Why willpower gets exhausted. And why fighting desire directly never works. That is next.
Many people try to defeat desire with discipline. They push harder. They tighten control. They demand more from themselves. This works for a while. Then it collapses. Why discipline feels like the answer. Discipline gives structure. It creates order. It feels strong. It feels responsible. So when desire causes chaos, discipline looks like the solution. But discipline does not remove desire. It only resists it. The problem with constant resistance. Resistance requires energy. Every time you suppress a want, you spend force. Every time you say, not now, something inside tightens. This cannot last forever. Eventually, discipline gets tired. Desire does not. Why willpower always runs out? Willpower is limited. It depends on mood, on sleep, on stress, on emotion. Desire does not depend on these. It waits. The moment your guard drops, desire returns, often stronger. This is why strict control often ends in collapse. Why fighting desire makes it stronger. When you fight desire, you keep it in focus. You think about what you are denying. This attention feeds it. The mind becomes obsessed with the thing it avoids. Desire grows through resistance. The cycle people fall into. It usually looks like this: control, pressure, exhaustion, release, guilt, control again. This cycle feels productive at first, but it never ends. It only becomes more tiring.
Why discipline without understanding is cruel. Discipline without insight turns against you. You blame yourself for wanting. You feel weak for craving. You judge your own mind. This creates inner conflict. You are at war with yourself, and no one wins that war. Why desire cannot be commanded. Desire does not respond to orders. You cannot tell it, stop. You cannot scare it away. You cannot shame it into silence. Desire ignores force. It only weakens when it is understood. What actually changes desire? Desire fades when it is seen clearly, when you recognize how it moves, how it never finishes, how it creates dissatisfaction. Something shifts. You stop feeding it with belief. This is not control. It is awareness. The difference between control and insight. Control tightens, insight loosens. Control says, I must hold this down. Insight says, I see what this is. Desire loses power when you stop mistaking it for truth. Why this feels less dramatic. There is no battle here, no victory moment, just a quiet reduction. The urge still appears, but it does not command. Where we go next? Now we must face something uncomfortable. Why desire often pretends to be ambition. Why letting go feels like giving up. And why stopping is feared more than failure. That is next.
Desire rarely appears openly. If it did, people would question it. So it wears a better name, ambition. Why ambition is hard to question. Ambition is praised. It is seen as strength, as discipline, as purpose. People admire it, reward it, encourage it. So when desire speaks through ambition, no one suspects it. How desire borrows respectability. Desire says, I want more. Ambition translates it into, I want to grow. Desire says, I'm afraid of stopping. Ambition turns it into, I'm driven. The language changes. The pressure stays. Why letting go feels like failure. When desire becomes ambition, stopping feels shameful. You think, if I slow down, I'm wasting potential. You fear regret more than exhaustion, so you continue, not because you love the path, but because you fear the alternative. Why people confuse motion with meaning. Movement feels alive. Stillness feels empty, so people keep moving to avoid facing quiet. Desire takes advantage of this. It convinces you that stopping means losing identity. How desire attaches to self-worth. At some point, ambition becomes personal. You stop chasing goals, you start protecting identity. I am the one who strives. I am the one who achieves. Now, desire is no longer external. It is who you think you are. Letting go feels like self-erasure.
Why burnout doesn't stop the chase. Even exhaustion doesn't stop desire. It only slows the body. The mind keeps racing. You rest but feel guilty. You pause but feel behind. Desire remains active, even when energy is gone. Why people fear stopping more than failing. Failure has an explanation. Stopping does not. Failure can be blamed on circumstances. Stopping forces a harder question. Who am I without this chase? That question frightens most people. So they keep moving. The illusion of purpose. Not all purpose is real. Some purpose is just structured desire. It keeps you busy. It keeps you distracted. It keeps you from stillness. But busyness is not meaning. The first, honest separation. At some point, you notice a difference between what excites you and what pressures you. Desire always pressures. True interest does not. This distinction is subtle, but once seen, it changes everything. Where we go next. Now comes the hardest moment. What happens when desire weakens? What remains when chasing slows? And why that quiet state feels unsettling yet deeply stable. That is next.
When desire begins to loosen, nothing dramatic happens. There is no celebration, no breakthrough moment. There is just quiet, and that quiet confuses people. Why the first feeling is emptiness. Desire filled space. It gave direction. It gave urgency. It gave reason to move. When it weakens, that space opens, and the mind says something is missing. It mistakes absence of pressure for absence of meaning. Why people panic at this stage? Many people turn back here. They feel unmotivated, detached, unsure. So they rush to replace desire. New goals, new plans, new struggles, anything to avoid stillness. They think something went wrong. It didn't. Why calm feels unfamiliar. You were trained to live in tension. Pressure felt normal. Rest felt temporary. So when the inner push fades, calm feels strange, almost unsafe. The mind looks for problems because it is used to solving them. What remains without desire? Without desire shouting, other things become audible. Small interests,
simple routines, quiet attention. You notice things again, not intensely, naturally.
Why this state is misunderstood. People describe this phase as boredom, lack of ambition, loss of drive. But it is none of these. It is freedom from compulsion. You are no longer pulled. You choose. Why productivity changes. You still act, but action comes from clarity, not pressure. You do less, but what you do feels cleaner. There is no inner argument, no constant self-pushing. Why comparison loses power. When desire weakens, comparison fades. You stop measuring your life against other lives, not because you feel superior, but because comparison no longer serves anything. The quiet confidence that appears. Confidence changes shape here. It is no longer loud. It does not prove. It does not chase approval. It exists without effort. Why this feels like losing an old friend. Desire was familiar. It gave identity. It gave direction. Letting it go feels like loss. But what you lose was never peace. It was noise. Where we go next. Now comes the final understanding. What remains when desire no longer rules? Why this state is not happiness, but something steadier, and why failure finally loses its meaning. That is where we end.
When desire no longer leads, life does not become exciting. It becomes lighter. Why this is not happiness. Happiness rises and falls. It depends on outcomes, on people, on circumstances. What appears here is different. It does not spike. It does not collapse. It stays. Why failure finally loses power. Failure only mattered because desire made it matter. Failure delayed what you wanted. Failure threatened identity. Failure interrupted the chase. When the chase ends, failure becomes an event, not a judgment, not a threat, just something that happened. Why success also loses its grip. Success no longer promises salvation. It becomes useful, but not sacred. You can succeed without attaching yourself to it. You can fail without collapsing. Both lose their drama. What you gain instead? You gain steadiness, patience, a quieter mind. You stop asking, is this enough? Because enough is no longer a target, it is a state.
Why life feels slower and better. Without urgency, time stretches. Moments feel fuller. Days feel manageable. You are no longer racing your own thoughts. You live where you are. Why this freedom is invisible to others. Others may not notice any change. You still act, you still work, you still move. But inside, the pressure is gone. And that is something only you can feel. Why this path is rare. Most people never stop wanting. Not because they are weak, but because desire feels like life itself. Walking away from it looks like giving up, but it is not. It is stepping out of a loop. The final truth, failure was never the enemy. Desire was. Failure stopped you. Desire never did. Once you see this, you stop fearing the wrong thing. The ending that is not loud. There is no victory here, no transformation story. Just a quiet understanding. You don't need to win life. You only need to stop being chased by it. And when that happens, failure loses its threat, success loses its noise, and desire finally loosens its grip.